Hi, this is Jonah Karsh, intern here with Dear Evanston, and we are live from the Evanston Public Library, where Stephen Vick is getting ready to give his talk on his book, Soul Consciousness, a new vision of community empowerment and cultural transformation. So I'll turn the camera around and let it go for him.
You good?
Okay, hello everyone again. I'm back. Yay! And we're ready to get started. Grab your seats, please. My name is Russell Johnson, and welcome to the Evanston Public Library for a very special event. Yay! Tonight we are very happy to welcome Stephen Vick as he shares his remarkable new book, Soul Consciousness, a new vision of community empowerment and cultural transformation. We are especially excited to host tonight's conversation at the library because EPL is committed to providing the Evanston community with a place to gather, connect, and engage. And in that same spirit of connection and engagement, Soul Consciousness offers a blueprint for harnessing the power of community members in solving complex problems like crime, homelessness, drug abuse, and unemployment. Instructive, inspiring, and featuring interviews with community leaders from across the country, Soul Consciousness explores how greater spirituality and a shared sense of humanity can fuel real change, and it has been praised by Harvard University's Roberto Gonzalez as required reading for youth workers, policymakers, elected officials, and anyone who cares about families and communities. Tonight, Mr. Vick will be joined in conversation by Miller, a change agent featured in the book, and following their talk, attendees can participate in a discussion with other community leaders who are profiled in Soul Consciousness. After that, copies of the book are for sale right there in the back of the room, so don't hesitate and get a copy signed. But now it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's special guests. First, Miller is a world traveler, social entrepreneur, and foodie who enjoys connecting with people from diverse backgrounds and cultures. Currently residing in Chicago, born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, and a proud graduate of The Ohio State University, Miller is a Buckeye in the Chi who has held leadership and executive roles in both the public and private sectors. As an advocate for equality and inclusion who encourages and facilitates courageous conversations, Miller is passionate about empowering marginalized communities by helping to create access to resources and positive visibility for its members. Please join me in welcoming Miller. Max Stephen Vick is the Executive Director of the Infant Welfare Society of Evanston. Over his 25 years as a social worker, educator, and community advocate, he has also served as Executive Director of the McCormick Tribune YMCA and taught as an adjunct professor in the University of Chicago School of Social Service Administration. An Evanston native and ETHS grad, he lives with his family in Chicago. Please join me in welcoming Stephen Vick.
Evanston. I grew up in the Skokie, Evanston area, so a little bit of both, and went to Walker School, went to Haven Middle School, and graduated from ETHS in 1988, and so I kind of a incident. Um, in Evanston that I'll share that, and I'll come to this a couple times. Evanston's like a double-edged sword. There's a lot of amazing things about Evanston, and there's some really difficult things. And in terms of my Jewish identity, I was kind of made aware at an early age about my identity by anti-Semitism, and had a lot of experiences that are very vivid in my mind growing up in the neighborhood I did. Of having fights in Central Park and having to defend myself as a Jewish person, and I didn't really have a context or didn't really understand what it meant to be Jewish. I have one example in the book where I was at Central Park and there was a boy in the neighborhood who was standing on top of the bathroom structure throwing asphalt roof tiles at me and calling me a kike and a dirty Jew and go home and get out of here, and one of them hit me in the back. And I ran home crying as a 10-year-old or 11-year-old and got my eldest brother, who came back to the park and literally tore his Schwinn bicycle to pieces with the brick wall that was below him. But those were powerful memories. Not too long after that, a family moved in near us, and one day we woke up to find out that there were swastikas and Hitler signs and again, go home Jew, and that family moved very quickly from the neighborhood. So it was a very powerful experience of anti-Semitism with someone who really didn't understand their own Judaism. And so I was taught a bit about otherness by anti-Semitism, and I got a window into what it felt like, even though I have white skin, I have all the privileges of living in an upper middle class home and those sorts of things. There was something different, and I didn't understand it. And that drove me in a certain direction in terms of understanding identity itself. And I think the other piece that was really profound is something that I think we all know about Evanston, is the disparity that exists and the isolation of different communities from economic and racial. We crossed the river and we're in the 5th Ward. For me, I remember vividly riding my bike or walking to school to ETHS and having to cross that river. And I didn't have the language for it or the understanding or the concept of it, but I knew that I was in a different neighborhood, and I came from a predominantly white neighborhood, more affluent, into a predominantly black neighborhood, less affluent. And I think one of the great things about the time I came up a lot of our friends had mixed group of friends, and we commingled, and there was no issue for us at our age, but we were very conscious of the racism and the isolation that was happening in different communities. And I think the window of that otherness I felt of anti-Semitism when I was coming up helped me get a little insight into wanting to understand more about culture, community, race, identity, and how I fit into it and how I didn't. And so those are a lot of strong tenets in this book about who we are as people, the shells that we walk around in our skin, and what's deeper within us. And so I think those experiences of Evanston and Skokie were really powerful, and I think they were pretty fundamental in the book.
Yeah, in the book there's a story that you tell about being, when you went a little bit about this otherness, and you talked a little bit about this experience of a child and there was a party of sorts. And tell me a little bit more about the story, because I think that was one of the things that began to resonate with me as I was reading the book, because while I am not Jewish, for those who didn't know, there are opportunities and experiences where otherness has become a part of my identity. And so when I have friends and people that I know that I'm able to work with and collaborate with, I'm always curious about that otherness and when that happened in their life. So tell us a little about that.
So the story that I read about is in one of the beginning chapters. And it's a very vivid, again, another vivid memory of mine in 7th grade at Haven. And I'll give you the brief version. I recall there was some event, some party, a cotillion that people were being invited to. And it was apparently an important event of the time. My group of guy friends at age 12, were getting invitations, and people were talking about where they're going to go and who they're going to meet before and who they're going to take on a date or what have you. And as the week went on, more of my friends kept getting invitations, and I didn't get one. And I kept wondering to myself, well, what, I'm sure it's going to come in the mail. And so there was a moment in front of Haven where I was standing, in our group of friends, if you will, our guy group was about 10 guys, and about 7 of them were Caucasian, Christian, and the 3 of us that weren't didn't get an invitation. So it was my friend who was Filipino, my other friend who was black, and myself, the Jewish kid. We're all standing around in front of Haven, kind of looking at each other like, why didn't we get invited to the party? And we, as an 11-year-old, how do you process all that? And again, it's a little window. I don't equate oppression. Everyone has their own personal experiences, and everyone has a different life experience. But for me, that was pretty profound, sitting with, I don't want to use their names, but I remember them vividly, and we're looking at each other just like, what's going on? Why didn't my town invite me to this party? And again, it was this calling of, well, I'm a Jewish kid, whatever that means. And so anyway, those were those windows of experiences that are, again, some of the underbelly of Evanston, right? I mean, I think, as I've said, I love Evanston. I am born and bred and have 100 million great things to say about Evanston. But if we don't talk about the difficult things, what's really happening, both from the past and current, we're not gonna solve the problems. We need to explore a little bit about the pain we feel,
absolutely,
and the challenges that we have as human beings. Kind of understanding this complex world we live in, right? In this racialized world where we have to kind of move in our identities. So yeah, that was a profound.
Yeah, and the intersection of identities is something that continues to come up. And I mean, we're in a situation right now where we're looking at the social climate, and we're looking at different communities. And I'm driving through Evanston, and I see all these Black Lives Matter signs, and I see love over hate and all these different things. And so it's very interesting to hear kind of a firsthand experience. So thank you, one, for sharing that and being so courageous and vulnerable to be able to share some of those experiences, because while they were painful, what it sounds like is that you've been able to turn those painful experiences into opportunities to be able to effectively and courageously engage communities and to develop a kind of like a bridge builder of sorts, to be able to find ways to utilize your intersections of your identity to infuse good work into the community. And it's also something that is ingrained in kind of the fabric of your book. So how would you define and structure what really inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, so the thing that, I've been thinking about this book and the contents of it for many, many years, right? As you're trying to understand self and identity, and as I went off to school and started studying and learning and then having more work experiences and other various experiences, you start piecing things together in your head. But the pen actually came to paper. I know the exact moment where I said I need to start writing something down, and it was 3.5, 4 years ago. I was in Kansas City, Kansas, working for a company called the Center for Neighborhood Enterprise, based out of Washington, D.C. And I was a consultant working on a contract with other facilitators. And it was an experience of a week of incredible connection with grassroots organizations, church groups, synagogues, mosques, local leaders. We brought together 40 or 50 organizations, very similar to Cradle to Career in Evanston. It was a collective impact model, trying to solve very deep-seated problems in what was Wyandotte County in Kansas. And one of the things that I most remember, we were staying in a hotel in a more affluent county and drove our way into Wyandotte County on a street called Rainbow Boulevard, going to a community house called the Avenue of Life. And it sounds kind of made up. And as we crossed into the counties, there was a huge expanse of a bridge, this old steel bridge going, again, separating community from community, right? Just like in Evanston, the bridge and the river that separates community from community. And as I drove down the Rainbow Boulevard and had this experience with these amazing people, I knew I had to put pen to paper. And I think some of the facilitators are in the book. Miller is in the book as well. We have another experience together, working together. But I think one of the things I realized is this isn't just about me and my experiences. I certainly share experiences in the book and anecdotes and experiences in DCFS and in different communities of challenge and what have you. But the 9 people that are in this book are just incredible people that are not only my mentors and friends, but colleagues and people that I got to travel around the world, or the nation with. I actually have a slide I want to share these people with you. I'll come back to this. But these are the people that are in the book, and they're 9 incredible leaders, change agents, and I knew that I had such powerful connection with these folks, and they had stories to share also. And so I wanted to share their stories, and so part of the book was traveling around the country interviewing these people and trying to understand their own concepts of spirituality, of greater purpose, of mission, and then how they connected that to community efforts and community work.
And one of the other things that we really can't go without mentioning is the fact that you utilize, your desire to write this book and put this work out, but you use it to create a space where you are elevating the voices of other people. And so a lot of the conversations in the book, they're dialogues, and they're conversations that tap into various topics, and you use this as an opportunity for people, like you said, to be able to share their stories. But then also, it was through a lens that was very much something that typically some of these voices have been silenced for so long. And so, I want to personally be able to thank you for the opportunity to be a part of that, but then also for the work that you've continued to do with yourself, with your family, with the communities that you're in. I think it's pretty powerful and profound. So we skipped a couple slides. I do want to go back to some of the framework that you had. And you have a quote from Dr. King that I think is pretty powerful. And then everyone has one of the slides that you have. You have something that says restructuring the edifice. And so I'm not sure if you are familiar with this King's work. Steve is going to go through kind of where this came from and then how this then ties into the book. So when you get to that slide, you can follow along here if you're having difficulty with the projector.
Yeah, thanks for bringing us back to this. So I do think that this quote that you have and the one that is up there now is a foundational quote from the book. Every chapter has a quote, and I tried to bring, I think we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors, right? And there's a lot of wisdom, and that's what quotes are about, is bringing wisdom, right? And so I tried to bring a quote from people, and it's pretty ironic that we're 50 years post-assassination of Dr. King, right? We just had that anniversary pass, and 50 years plus post-civil rights, but we still find ourselves in the same situation, right? With the same struggles. And I think one of the things that was so profound to me moving back to Evanston was, I spent, again, a lot of time in the city of Chicago, in predominantly Humboldt Park and Logan Square. And when I came back to work in Evanston, it was fascinating to me that the same issues 40 years later are still the same critical challenges of Evanston. Equity, economics and race, disparity, trying to move through our understanding of self and context with one another, trying to be able to communicate with one another in a deeper way, in a profound way. Those are all the same issues. And so this, to me, I think it deserves reading. I'm going to read it as you look at it. A true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies. On the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside, but that will be only an initial act. One day we must come to see that the whole Jericho road must be transformed so that men and women will not be constantly beaten and robbed as they make their journey on life's highway. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. That's powerful language. And if you don't know this quote from Dr. King, it was when he first came out and stood against the Vietnam War later in his life. And I think this speech was one of his more powerful and the most challenging to the system. And I think that, for me, the concept of a revolution of values and restructuring the edifice is core, and that speaks to our identities as human beings. What are our values? What are our core beliefs? And what do we need to change in order to move the needle, right? And so the flip side of that sheet is I created a paradigm, right? I mean, I'm an educator. We need things to help us move through things. And so I call this restructuring edifice a revolution of values. And I think if we're really going to have a revolution of values, they have to be physical, a physical change. And so those are how we engage and interact with our community and environment. It has to be a cognitive change, how we learn, think, grow, communicate, and understand. It has to be an emotional change, a relationship of love, empathy, caring with yourself and others. And it has to be a spiritual change, our shared purpose and deeper human connectivity and collective being. So that's really the paradigm or model with which this book was written. And I think this is a journey I think a lot of us are on. I'm on this journey. I think anyone who works in diversity and inclusion or equity work will tell you this isn't a class and you're done. This isn't a come to a lecture and then you've checked the box and now you are fully understanding the world of cultural competency. It's a life journey, right, that we have to go on as we interact with each other. And so the revolution of values that I think Dr. King talked about was so profound in his time, and it's so true 50 years later. He used a concept in terms of the restructuring of values that is really powerful. And I think Dr. King is one of those leaders that we all look to, right? That we look back to. And there's a lot of amazing leaders in our history, but Dr. King is one of those leaders. There's a quote that he used about this called the non-enforceable demand. It's in another part of his writing. And what the non-enforceable demand is, it can't be legislated, it can't be written into an article, it can't be part of the Civil Rights Act. It is non-enforceable. It's intrinsically part of our spirit and our human being and what it means to be who we are. That's the non-enforceable demand. That's the revolution of values. And so that's really the paradigm I think I used in me trying to find the language for this, and what I tried to do in the interviews with yourself and the other leaders that are in the book. So do I see Jewel in the back? So Jewel made it. Hi, Jewel. Jewel, we're going to bring Jewel up in a little bit. She's in the book as well. But anyway, so that is the core concept of, I think, part of this book is the restructuring of the edifice, which is a scary concept, right? I mean, we're talking about changing the paradigm with which we operate. But 40 years later, I'm still crossing that river. I'm still dealing with the same things. I work very much passionately in the 5th Ward at the Family Focus Building, and there's a lot of work happening there in the community. I work with the Infant Welfare Society of Evanston, and there's a lot of educational equity issues we're dealing with. There's a lot of things that Evanston needs to grapple with, and I think a lot of us are doing some of the work. Some of us are doing more, and then there's some of us that aren't doing much of that anything.
I mean, there's some heavy lifting involved in there. And there's also a bit of soul consciousness that is required. Not a plug for the book, but like seriously, because there's this opportunity for people to experience things from a very surface perspective and kind of walk through life and navigate it in a way that says, well, that's not my experience, or I'm not able to relate to that because that doesn't happen here. And every time, or this notion of colorblindness, or not seeing someone in their full identity, and so therefore we run the risk of completely eliminating and silencing entire communities when we decide that we don't see someone for who they are and take into account how these dynamics allow for them to be able to navigate life, or how they have to make adjustments to be able to walk through life. So this piece that you have bolded, it says, it comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs to be restructured. So it's not the beggar that is the problem. It is the system or the overarching environment that has created and allowed for there to be a beggar to begin with that we have to begin to explore. And that is what I'm hearing you say when you break this down in a physical, emotional, spiritual, cognitive way. And there's layers and levels to it, and it's not going to always feel comfortable. Think about, as you're hearing this, think about your physiological responses that you're having to that.
Well, it's profoundly uncomfortable.
Hello?
These conversations are profoundly uncomfortable.
No.
Because they get to the heart of what's most difficult for us is in this complex culture.
You mean this don't feel good to you? Your shoulders are not like...
I think that for a lot of us, these are very difficult conversations.
Extremely.
And it takes us to very personal places. And we all have, one thing I want to share is that I'm the first to say I have a lot of work to continue to do. And we all do. I don't think this isn't for white people, this isn't for black and brown people, this is for all of us. We all have lived in this soup, if you will, of racism, of sexism, of this cultural context of oppression that we've lived in. And certainly in the last couple of years, the language has been ratcheted up, right? And it didn't start with our current president, but it's certainly the language has elevated the tribalism in the camps that we're feeling. And there's friends, I have difficulty talking to some friends that have a different political persuasion than I do now, which didn't used to be the case. So I think there's a lot of need for a new direction. We need a path forward, because what's happening now isn't sustainable. It's just not. We're heading to a very bad place. And I think most people, not everyone, but most people are feeling that. And so we need to find tools and resources. But I want to come back to one thing that you shared that's really important, is this concept of color blindness. And I think that's a really important concept, because the book talks about a deeper place beyond the melanin in our skin, right? The soul, and again, we all have different opinions of spirituality and soul and religion, and this book tried to take the broadest approach to spirituality. I didn't want to isolate anyone in their belief system, or the atheist, or the person who's secular. I think people who don't have a spiritual persuasion have deep moral convictions, whether it's justice and goodness and compassion. That doesn't have to have a religious connection, but I happen to be a very spiritual person and wanted to talk about my spirituality and our spirituality. But this concept of color blindness you can't pass over, because I think you have to do the work first before you can get to the soul and the spirit, which I do believe binds us as human beings like nothing else. We must get through the layers of the skin and the culture and the context, because there's so much history. There's so much history that we have to work through as a people. So I think the color blindness piece is such an easy out. This color blindness meaning that, I don't see race, I don't see color. You have to see it because it's important to people. People's identity is crucially important to them. Their context, their color, their ethnicity, their origin, right? We need to respect that in people. But once we can do that effectively, which we haven't done yet, then I think we can start to delve deeper into the spiritual realm and the soul and these parts of us that I think connect us as human beings.
So one thing, just a little bit of housekeeping and maintenance. I want to, one, make sure that everyone knows that the restrooms are right outside the door. Two, we will have time at the end for questions. So if you have anything, because I understand that this is one of those things, this is where you like to have some dialogue, and while Steve and I can do this all day, trust me, because we have, we would definitely like to have some audience engagement and participation and be able to find a way for us to be able to collectively have a conversation, whether we agree or not. We want to create a safe space, a no judgment zone for us to be able to engage in an open dialogue, to be able to start to plant the seed for some of these conversations. And to Steve's point earlier, this is not an exhaustive conversation. This is not the end all be all. We would love to be able to continue to walk through this together and have these conversations on a more consistent basis, because sometimes we learn something today and it takes us a while for us to mull over. People say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. My question is always, why are you eating an elephant? But nevertheless,
these are difficult, and my background in education is all about this kind of stuff in my career, and I struggle daily with it. And I think we all do. And trying to, we have different experiences and things that happen to us on a daily basis. And that's one of the things I talk about in the book too, is kind of moving through this challenge of pain and pain points. And when we talk about all these deep issues of race and culture and the community within which we live and the challenges we see, there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of frustration. And we have to work through those things as human beings in order to get to a higher place. And that only comes through dialogue and conversation, and authentic dialogue and conversation. And I think not enough of us are having authentic conversations because we don't know each other. We live on other sides of the river. Very few of us, and Evanston certainly has diverse areas. Don't get me wrong, I'm speaking in generalizations. There's a lot of amazing diversity in Evanston. But I would say, this is from my training in diversity and inclusion, you can have a diverse table. That doesn't mean there's inclusion at that table.
yes.
We can have a diverse group of people in a diverse setting, but does everyone feel respected, honored, trusted, welcomed, appreciated? That's inclusion.
Absolutely.
And so diversity is one thing, inclusion is a different thing. And I think we're striving towards that. We're not there yet. And again, Evanston is a great example of the larger community of the country, right? I mean, Evanston is a microcosm of the United States. And so this isn't just our problem, this is a national problem. And then when you take it even further, these issues of race and culture and class are in Latin America, they're in the Caribbean, they're in Europe, they're in Africa. I mean, they're all over the globe. So this isn't a Evanston issue. You know, we Evanstonians tend to think that we it's our issue. It's not our issue. This is all over the place. But we are uniquely poised, I think, to solve part of this issue because of our proximity to each other, because we have such strength as a community, because there are so many caring, passionate people in Evanston. We all just need to open our eyes a little wider, all of us. And so that's why I keep coming back to it's not a work for white people. It's not a black and brown issue. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do. I think we all have work to do. We all have conversations to have. We all have to go without and externally in the community and understand and sit in someone else's skin for a little bit and then go back internally and look inside your own self and your own spirit and your own convictions and morality and all those things. So it's a dual, it's kind of this dichotomy that's happening. It has to be external and it has to be internal. And I think that's what I tried to do in the book with some of these stories. I keep thinking about Jewel. I think we should bring Jewel up. I'm just feeling like Jewel needs to come up. So I want to introduce you guys. Are you going to read her? Let's go for the quote. Yeah. So Jewel, come on up. This is my good friend Jewel Holly Ware.
Welcome. Right here.
So Jewel is one of these leaders that I highlighted in the book along with Miller, and I'm just so glad she could come tonight and be with us and share her wisdom.
So I think one of the things, we have a quote up from you in the book. And this quote is, I believe we are spiritual beings in human form. If you ask me what my essence is after, everyone has a purpose of being. You said that.
That's true, I did. Hello, everyone.
And so as we're navigating through this conversation and we're going through it, we've touched on a lot of things. I think one of the things, and based on the work that you have done, I mean, there's also, you say, you believe in the intersections of knowledge and insight. It's not enough to possess knowledge. You need to be able to connect the dots and see how knowledge applies to you, and you can enhance your effectiveness and positively impact you and those around you. And so as we're thinking about moving through this, I would love for you guys to engage. After you tell us a little bit more about yourself, I'm going to ask you guys to engage in a conversation around the power of community. All right? I feel like I'm sitting amongst giants right now.
So, hi. So I think I'm going to start, since you have this quote behind me, because... I can.
Resourceful girl, okay.
Resourceful. And so when he said he feels he's sitting in front of giants, I want us to be very clear. Well, number one, either we're all giants or none of us are giants. So it's either all or nothing. And everyone in this room has wisdom. Everyone. Everyone has something to share. Everyone has something to learn from every other person in this room. And so when I look at this quote saying we are spiritual beings in human form, the reality is we have to experience something on this level in order to grow. Because if you don't have the challenges, if everything is always up, you're going to lose that degree of appreciation. And oftentimes those down periods are the periods that allow us to connect with each other on that human molecular level.
The soul consciousness.
But of course.
We tap into our soul consciousness.
And so I love that. I was about to ask a question to the audience, and I'm like, Jewel, be quiet. And so what would you like to know? Which layer would you like?
I think what I would like, one, tell me, give us a little bit of background. Like, how did you get to the point where you are wanting to engage and connect with people in this humanistic way and be able to tap into this idea that there's something that everybody brings to the table? You know, I grew up, my grandma used to tell me you got to come to the table with more than just your appetite. So how do people come to the table with more than just their appetite?
Okay, so show of hands. How many of you want me to stay surface? How many of you want me to go deep? Go deep. Okay, so to answer your question, I'm going to give you the short version.
Come on, a British version.
Short version. So how did I get to the point where I believe connecting with human beings are so valuable? Number one, for those of you that didn't notice as I walked up, I have a limp. I was one of those that got caught in the last wave of polio in this country. And this is where we say, oh, you don't look that old. Come on. Thank you. So we have that. We have, so I had a physical illness. My father has schizophrenia. So I grew up in a household not only with a physical illness, but mental illness as well. And if my grandmother hadn't taken me, I would have grown up in an orphanage. So you put all of those together, and you have someone that really believes in the power of human beings, and you really have to look beneath the surface. You can't take things at face value. I do a lot of classes around the country, and last year I remember someone coming up to me saying, you don't understand. You don't understand what it is to have problems. You don't understand what it is to have challenges. And I burst out laughing. I was like, truly you jest. So we just have to take the time to peel the onion a little bit, because we can always find commonalities.
I was going to say, thank you for sharing that, first of all, and that's in the book. We talked, in the interview. I tried in all these interviews, because I knew a lot of these people very well. I wanted to get to the core issues, right, of people as human beings, and so some of these issues came out. And one of the concepts that one of the other people in the book came up with that he shared that I thought was so amazing, his name was Roberto Rivera, was the concept of post-traumatic growth. And I think, how many of you heard of post-traumatic stress, right? PTSD. We've all heard that concept, but the concept I had never heard before was post-traumatic growth. And so what is that? Well, it's, post-traumatic stress is an incident of trauma, and hopefully you can be resilient and get back to the place where you started. That's good, and that's a lot of work that clinicians do and working through trauma, but are we actually growing through the traumatic experience? So the concept of post-traumatic growth is taking a traumatic experience, dealing with the pain of that experience, and then moving through it to a higher place. And one of the things that Roberto Rivera shared a lot is that we need to share those stories with each other. We need to share those human stories of struggle and challenge. And we all have different stories. Not everyone's going to have polio or a schizophrenic parent. Everyone's going to, X, Y, Z. We all have different stories. But it's a human condition to have pain and have struggle. And so how do we move through those as individuals and then as a community? And I will tell you, one of the premises I found out in doing this book and doing these interviews around the country is that is the secret to community change. There is no difference, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, between an individual's growth through pain and the struggles and the triumph you have to overcome or perseverance you need is no different than what communities need. It's just more complex. But it's the same concept of struggling through difficulty and challenge and doing the work to get to a higher place. And that's what we are doing in Evanston, right? We're striving towards that, many of us. Not all of us, many of us. But I think that's the same. The personal pain is no different than a community.
It's more intense.
Yeah. Hey, we wanted to turn this on you guys a little bit. And there's some questions we wanted to ask you all. So there's two questions, and so I'm going to ask everybody to do something real quick. If you have anything in your hand, put it down. Just put it on the seat or below you so you're not holding anything. So before I ask these questions, I'm going to ask everyone to do me a favor. Everyone sit up very straight. Okay? Even if you want to push to the front of your chair. And I want you to take a very deep breath in through your nose. Deep breath. Hold it. And then release it. Okay, 2 more times. Deep breath through your nose. Hold it. Release it. Last time. So I have found through my experience, and I didn't share this, I've been studying Chinese martial arts and meditation for over 25 years. I've found the breath is a very powerful thing. And many of us have forgotten how to breathe correctly. If you look at an infant breathe, I work at the Infant Welfare Society, we see infants all the time, their stomach rises and falls, they take full abdominal breaths. That's the original breath. We tend to chest breathe as adults. But I wanted to have you take some breaths because I'm going to ask you all to now engage a little bit more than just silently watching us talk. And so I'm going to ask you to turn to somebody, preferably someone you didn't walk in here with. But don't get up, just someone near you. And I want you to briefly, in 2 minutes, have one person share one of these questions and then vice versa. So you can pick which question you'd like to share. But I'd like you to take 2 minutes each to answer one of these questions. What do you believe your purpose to be in relation to serving community? Or the other question is, what is one example of a challenge that you have overcome in your life? Fairly deep questions. So go ahead, take 2 minutes, turn to somebody.
Mind if I film you guys?
What do you believe your purpose to be in relation to serving? Would you like to go first than me? I'm a dream. I'm looking for ways to find service for the community, and finding those ones I found that I connect with, and using my resources to support that. That's right. That's my guiding light as I look for jobs, like that. It has to be something that I connect to. In order for me to raise my but the goal is I need to see an impact. The next question feeds into that one.
Profound. It's all I'm sorry. Because I think about it in other days, I just wake up and I do and I leave, and then I'm at a meeting in the 5th floor.
Just another side. Just another side.
But I had
So if I could get everyone's attention again.
Oh, if you
If you can hear my voice, clap once.
Yeah.
If you can hear my voice, clap twice. If you can hear my voice, clap 3 times. There you go, Steve.
So, thank you, Miller. So, I just wanted to ask everybody, and please, if anyone's interested, just raise your hand and you can share. These are fairly deep questions to share with somebody next to you that you may not know. What was it like sharing one of these either question? What was it like for you? What was the experience of sharing and hearing like? Go ahead. Hi, Amy.
I love talking to strangers, and
As you were the first person to put your hand up.
but I hate my voice in a microphone. Yeah, I love talking to strangers, and that's kind of like my way of sort of, Julie, you're saying, kind of like staying light in love is like to look for those opportunities to just have these random conversations with people like out and about. You know, and for the purpose of nothing, you know, we're not exchanging phone numbers or hooking each other up with some fantastic job or whatever. It's just some kind of meaningful exchange. So I find that when people ask each other like, oh, how are you? Fine, good, thanks. You know, it's like these sorts of cordial responses. But I always try to sort of say something real, you know, like, I was doing great, but then, oh my God, this like, you know, thing happened. And then I thought, oh, well, you know, whatever, just some little quick scenario that, you know, an observation or something that people can kind of connect with. So, yeah, I'm kind of one of those people that will start talking to you anywhere.
Quick, get the mic, get the mic.
Thank you for sharing.
How about
Anybody else like to
somebody
share?
else? What was the experience, either telling a story or hearing a story? My daughter raised her hand. My daughter, Carla.
Hello. I actually used to be a shyer, I don't know if that's a word, but more shy child as I was younger, and I find it very liberating now to share something with someone even if I don't know them, because like you were saying, like a lot of people feel we do have different experiences, and talking to someone even if you don't know them is very liberating, because initially you wouldn't think you would have a similar experience, and then you get to know them, and it's completely different. So yeah, that's what I wanted to.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. We have one up front, Steve.
That's Camila.
We have one up front.
Hi. For me, this was affirming. And I love speaking to friends and strangers. I'm a people person. And this was a very affirming exercise because you get to look into someone's eyes, and their eyes really are windows to their soul, right? You get to see them and you get to hear them. And then you get, if you're graced with that blessing, you get a little, I don't know what just a little special warm hug, yeah, warm hug, affirmation. You get it back. So it's a volleyball for me, back and forth.
There's another person back there. We'll finish up with this last one.
Thank you for sharing.
The type of questions actually caused us to share something deep and personal. And I was surprised that I even opened up and shared something that I even felt was kind of prejudicial on my part. And she shared something very personal with her going on when she was a child. And so it did bring us closer, and it caused us to have that moment, do you see me? Instead of when you meet someone and it's that shallow, oh, how are you? And if you try to answer that question and they dismiss you, oh, yeah, and they, look away, or, I don't really have time for that long explanation. So it was very good. It was kind.
Thank you. Yeah, so I connect with that very deeply. I think that often we walk around with our guards up, right? We rarely open up to people that we don't know, and sometimes even people we know, we don't open up to them. And so when we're prompted to have this kind of dialogue, it's what I believe is our souls are connecting. our spirits are connecting beyond the external of who we are. When you can start to have, conversations. And this, we're going to have a Q&A soon, a question and answer, and I'm going to end with a practice or a paradigm practice that we can walk away with that I think comes from the book. But I wanted to end with this because I think this is so profound to me, Acts of Kindness and Holy Sparks. There was a book I read when I started wanting to learn more about what my Jewishness was, what it meant. And there was a book I read called God is a Verb by a gentleman by the name of Rabbi David Cooper. And I connected it with profoundly because not only was he a rabbi, but he also studied Eastern philosophy and Taoist philosophy, which I have been studying for many, many years. And so I connected deeply with it. And he talked about a concept of giving and sharing holy sparks. And don't get caught up in the word holy. What he meant was a light that we share with each other, a powerful, intrinsic part of us that we have the ability to give one another through just simple words, through kindness. And so I put up here acts of kindness because living in now with this climate and this culture, kindness doesn't seem to be around too much. And so it's a very simple concept to be kind to one another, to open up to one another, to share your deeper self with somebody that doesn't look like you, talk like you, walk like you, dance like you, eat like you, right? We don't do that enough. And so your example of someone sitting right next to you that is different than you or you would have never shared, it's so simple yet so powerful. And I think that's part of what the stories in this book are about, are the stories of the different people that I have been profoundly touched by and that have profoundly touched others in their spheres of influence. And I think that little window we just did of an example is the beginning of what we need to do a lot more of, right? And I think in Evanston specifically, people are starting to have some more conversations, beyond diversity trainings and going to seed trainings and doing things that are challenging us to lean into our uncomfort, right? But we need to do more of it. And I don't think we've really skimmed the surface as a community and a society. And so that's part of this deeper piece of this soul consciousness, being aware of what I call our soul. And again, some of you may not believe in a soul. I think that's a whole other conversation that we have with everyone in the book. And that's a deeper conversation to have about your spiritual identity and what you believe in and what you don't. But there needs to be room, like Miller said, for everyone's voice and everyone's conversation. So I want to end with this paradigm model that you have. Everyone should have this. And then we'll have some time for question and answer. And then, if people want to buy a book, and I'll sign it and all that kind of fun stuff. But this, I got to give a lot of credit to Rashi, who's over there working the camera. She pulled this and drew this out of me, if you will, in a meeting that we had about this conversation and really put this together. So I give a lot of credit to Rashi and Miller for helping with this. But the first column is inclusion, and I think that has to be a foundation, right? The columns are foundational. And so again, inclusion to me is not diversity. Just because we sit together next to each other doesn't create inclusion. We have to honor, respect, trust, listen, communicate, cherish one another, and really find that space where people feel valued and appreciated. That's inclusion. And so the first part of that is resiliency, because we have to be resilient with ourselves. We have to be resilient in this work of peeling back our own layers and looking at our own history and our own social context. There's a lot of difficult conversations that need to be had in Evanston and across the country. The concept of post-traumatic growth I talked about, we have to be able to use that resiliency and then move forward beyond where we were previously. And then we have to pass the mic. We have to be able to share with other people. We have to tell our stories of resiliency. We have to tell our stories to one another. We're not doing that with each other anymore. The second, and I think I love this word disruption. We have to disrupt the status quo. It's not okay to sit in the life you're in and just be okay with it. Because everything we do, however we operate, we're coming in contact with different people. And we have to disrupt our perceptions, our biases, our stereotypes, what we have become comfortable with, the systems within which we operate, the structures within which we operate that have been created, that edifice that we talked about in the beginning. We have to remove these layers personally and externally. We have to all be transformational leaders. Transformational leadership isn't about one person, helping us all follow this transformational leader. No, you have to be a transformational leader. And what that means is that you're transforming yourself as you're transforming people in your sphere of influence. You're connecting with them in profound ways that help you both grow and excel. Moving through pain, we talked about that. We all have pain. Jewel very eloquently shared her own personal story. We all have those stories. We have to be able to move through it. And the last column is intentional. We have to be intentional in this work. This work can't just be a class you take or you come tonight, interesting conversation, and then leave it at that. You have to have ongoing conversation. You have to be intentional about this. You have to discover the goodness in our humanity. We've lost the sense of goodness. We're so polarized. We're so tribal. But there's deeper layers to us that we need to refine. And we all have our own ways of doing that. And then this exploration. We have to be willing to explore our own concepts, our own understanding, what we thought we knew, what we didn't know, how we were raised, the values we were taught. Are those the values I truly believe in? Those are challenging things to be intentionally exploring yourself in context with others. So this is kind of the practice. This is the workbook, if you will, of going home after this conversation. These are the things that we all need to do. And it's a journey. And we're all on this journey. And the only way we're going to move the needle, you talk about disparity in Evanston, you talk about equity, you talk about social constructs and people feeling isolated, geographically, economically isolated from one another. If we don't start talking to each other authentically, it's not going to change. So we have to cross the metaphorical bridge, right? And that's hard. It's hard work. And so my hope is that this book inspires and pushes and tells stories of people of power, that have gone through their own struggle and challenge, and that we keep moving. There is a path beyond what we see right now. Because right now, it's just not sustainable. And we need to find a different path. And my hope is that this is one of the stories in this path of change, of growth, of a deeper, what I call soul consciousness.
So, on that note, who would like, does anyone have any questions?
I just want to add one thing.
Tell us your name.
Stephanie Wayne Baker. Hi, I'm an Evanstonian, and I teach at the Infant Welfare Society. And I think the word that comes to mind when I look at this new paradigm is becoming an honorable ally. And allies stand. They don't falter. They stand with each other. They buoy each other up. They work together. And intentional allies, honorable allies, respectful allies. So we need allies.
Anyone else have any questions before we move out? Karen, hi. You're welcome. Karen, I over here.
And so my hope is that it starts conversation, dialogue. I know Russell has shared that the library may support some ongoing conversations. I think that this is the type of book that hopefully you can dialogue about and have, read a chapter and talk with people about it. And, what does that mean to you? What doesn't it mean? My hope is to continue doing lectures like this and conversations. This is the work I've been doing. There's a group of people that I've been fortunate to work with in Evanston that are talking about these issues and trying to elevate these conversations. And so I just see myself as one voice and wanting to try to push conversation and push us forward. Because we can't go backwards. And I don't want to see Evanston to continue to be where it is. And there has been growth, let's be honest, there's been a lot of growth. There's been movement, but on the other hand, there hasn't been, right? And so, how do we change that?
I'm Kate. I know we're probably over time.
Oh, you're fine.
No, we're here till 8:30. We have 15 minutes, so I mean, we could take some more questions.
You go, Kate. 15
Yeah,
minutes.
well, not just for you, Kate.
Yeah, equitable. We don't spread everything. And always in the back is that soul. No, I'm being facetious, but to your point.
Need the mic.
To your point about, moving forward and looking at a new vision of community empowerment, I can't speak for other people here, but as an Evanstonian, how do we do that? We're in a time where we need real community, right? Good, honest, positive communities that do empower. And when that one question was up about, what do you see your purpose is in community? I couldn't think about Evanston as my community, even though I participated in some things. I think of my church, maybe my parts of the neighborhood as community, but how on the ground, how do we get from here to there?
So I think that's a great question, and it's not an easy one, but I think you start with having this conversation. You start with learning about the community of Evanston you don't know. What is across the river? What is on the other side of town? We get comfortable in our spaces that we know. And Evanston does a really good job of people walking in their space. And we don't open our eyes very often. And so the challenge for you, and I think it's a different challenge for each person, is to have a deeper conversation or connection with someone that you don't know. Find spaces like this in Cradle to Career and Beyond Diversity Training, which is open to the public. Learn about yourself. We got to start with ourselves, right? We got to start with understanding our own biases, our own issues, our own challenges before we can go out and have real meaningful conversations. We have to learn, all of us. So it's challenging yourself to go beyond your sphere of influence. Spend time with people who don't dance like you, eat like you, talk like you, walk like you, look like you. And when you can do that more, you will find there's a richness in that. There's a quote from one of my mentors. His name is V.P. Parker. He's in the book. He's actually one of the last chapters. And he kind of was my mentor in diversity and inclusion training and a lot of work that I've done. And one of the quotes I love in his book, he said, our souls are like a patchwork quilt waiting to be woven together. Okay? We all have our own quilts, but are you actively trying to connect to others in ways that you don't usually? That's how you do it. And you have authentic relationship with people. And it takes time and it's challenging, but that's what you do. And that's a start.
Thank you, Kate. Give me a second, Karen. I'm gonna pass the mic.
You do it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm gonna go to the back and work my way forward. All right, I got one behind you.
Rita, because I see you. I was just wondering, why did you choose the 9 people that you did? Like, was there a specific moment where you were like, this is important, this needs to be shared, or was it just an overall feeling you got?
The book itself, you mean, like when I started writing?
How did you choose the people that you interviewed? How did you choose us?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Well, Jill, so I tell you, all the people in the book, I have had very deep and profound professional relationships with, and was very fortunate to travel around the country in my consulting career with all these different people in different, jobs and positions. It wasn't all one company. The Center for Neighborhood Enterprise, we met doing VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America. Jewel and I used to train VISTA volunteers across the country together. That's how we met. I met Miller at the YMCA. VP Parker was one of the lead facilitators for a company called Global Lead, which was at the time one of the premier minority-owned D&I, diversity and inclusion training entities, and I met him through that work, traveling around the country. So I think I've met many people, certainly not just these 9 people, there's many more people I've met that I've had profound, deep, spiritual, professional relationships with. They were my friends, my mentors, my colleagues, right? And we just had amazingly profound experiences. I'm having some of those at Infant Welfare Society of Evanston, where you work with people so deeply in such a passionate way that you build relationship with them. And so these people stood out to me as I need to share these stories. And I found things out about all these people that I never knew through the interview. So I'll share those stories for later, but there are amazing people out there, and certainly there's not just 9 of them, but those people that I shared I thought had profound stories to share with others, and had a profound impact on me in my learning journey.
Thank you for your question, Megan. Please, just real quick, everyone, we do have an email list on the back, so as we are continuing the dialogue, if you'd like to stay in tune with what's going on with Steve and Soul Consciousness, please make sure that you give your email in the back here, and also Soul Consciousness is available today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Selma. I've lived in Evanston for many years before. I moved out to Morton Grove to be closer to my parents, and somebody in the front asked, how do you do this? How do you get closer to people? So I want to introduce Morton Grove Women Who Drink Tea. It's a great group of women. It started off with just a few of us, Muslim women and Jewish women, that we got together during, after that Paris bombing stuff, and we just got together, and a neighbor of mine came to me and a few other people and said that, you know what, we need to know each other as a community. And I think it's been accomplished. We've got to know each other. We meet once in a while. We meet in the farmer's market, but we know each other as human beings and know that we really have all the same values. I'm a Muslim, and I have the same values as probably all of you. So I just want you to know that, and I find that unity in Evanston, and Morton Grove Women Who Drink Tea is a Facebook group. It's a private Facebook group, and we'd love to have you.
That's an awesome story. Thank you. Before the next person goes, I want to say something that's really profound about that. We are not hearing enough of those stories of community. And that's the other piece of this, is there is power and resiliency in our communities. Those things are happening. There are positive things happening. We don't hear about them in the news media. We're bombarded with negativity. But the power of community, and that group is a perfect example that needs to be elevated in our consciousness. And so thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Beth, and since we're issuing invitations, and I'm sitting here thinking how exactly one can get involved, please support me on this. I'm a volunteer for Interfaith Action of Evanston, and we run several soup kitchens as an organization in Evanston. Many of you probably volunteered for them. Also, our faith communities, our members, 41 members, have soup kitchens here. And I would like to issue an invitation to any of you who would like to come to a soup kitchen in Evanston. If you are not part of the 16% of the population of Evanston who is food insecure, then you will meet a whole different group of people than yourselves. You show no ID, nobody asks questions at Evanston Soup Kitchen. Just come in, maybe give a first name, maybe get a ticket or a number, get in line or wait for your number to be called, and you can have a meal. Now, if you're not food insecure, don't be a pig about the food. But we have a schedule on the Interfaith Action of Evanston website, and it might even be on the City of Evanston website, that gives you the location and the times during the week of all the soup kitchens that are offered in Evanston. I'd like to offer you an invitation to come as a guest and just observe, and probably you'll find people that you can talk to and maybe have a nice conversation. It's the beginning.
Do we have someone spinning me around? All right. Hi.
My name's Helen, and I really have a question for the audience. I have seen a sign a couple of times in Evanston, and I can't recall it exactly, but it talks about asking people to join together, to have a meal together, to talk with other people who may be different from themselves. And of course, your comment about coming to a soup kitchen is sort of relevant. Does anybody know this group? Has anybody seen these signs?
Karen, I'll bring it up.
Yeah.
I'll bring it up.
Thank you for your question.
What I'm thinking of is Dear Evanston. Kate was talking about how do we get from here to there, and Selma was great with bringing up Morton Grove Women Who Drink Tea. I was looking at her, I'm like, I know her. It's because we're in that same group and I've made her picture before. So I think Dear Evanston is the one that is having various dinners throughout the year. I hosted, along with the Evanston Cradle to Career and the Moran Center in Dear Evanston, the On the Table dinner that was in May, and that's an annual dinner, and it's been happening in the Chicago area for 5 years now, and very specifically in Evanston, past 3 years in May. I wanted to, that was actually what I was gonna bring up for Kate's question, and she asked the question again. So between Morton Grove Women Who Drink Tea, it started in Morton Grove, but there's a whole handful of women that are connected to that group, and it's more of a mindset than a geographic limitation. And Nina Cavan, K-A-V-I-N, is with Dear Evanston.
Dear Evanston's right there filming.
Oh, good. And Nina will be pleased that I said her name right, because it was Cavan for a while, but it's Cavan. So there's that. Also, to answer Kate's question, she said, how do we get from here to there? That was your question. You mentioned you have a church group. Keep asking that question. How do we get from here to there? Keep asking everybody you know, how do we get from here to there? Because they will keep coming up with answers. And some of them could be house parties, just like Morton Grove Women Who Drink Tea. Could be a variety of things. It could be very simple things.
And so, for the sake of time, we are going to end there. I think that's a great note. We do want to thank Dear Evanston for live streaming and being here tonight. We want to thank everyone for coming out and engaging in a conversation. Ms. Jewel, where we are so happy to have been able to engage in conversation with you. Steve, thank you for your work and what we have going on. If you are going to grab a book tonight, Steve is going to stick around for a little bit to be able to sign them for you. We also have books online. You can find them at Amazon. For those who like to read that electronic business, I'm slowly but surely rolling back into real books. I'm very upset about that, but I'm back into real books. So we have real books in the back. I'm going to pass the mic to Steve before we go. Thank you, everyone, for having us. Thank you for engaging in the conversation. It has been a pleasure to be here with you guys today.
I just want to say thank you. I'm going to actually just pass the mic back to Russell. We wanted to end with a few words from the library, but hopefully we can keep the conversation going.
Okay, everyone, let's get one more round of applause for Steve Miller Jewell. Thank you. I just want to thank you all for coming this evening and encourage you to sign up in the back. Leave your name and email. This is just the beginning of continuing conversations, and if you'd like to be a part, we'd love to have you back. So stay tuned and just jot your email down and we'll keep you posted on what we have planned next. So thanks so much. Good night.